One of my favorite verses in the New Testament by Paul is in the book of Galatians, chapter 4. And it goes like this, starting, I say verses, I'm going to read 3 verses here. Starting at verse 4 of chapter 4 of the Epistle to the Galatians. The Galatians, by the way, it's talking about a part of Asia Minor, what today is known as Turkey. It was a place where the Gallic peoples, the Galatians, lived. And Paul had started some churches there. When the time had fully come, God sent forth his Son, born of woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. And because you are sons, God has sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. Just a few words here. When you hear law, you should think Old Testament Torah. Okay, that's the first 5 books of the Bible. We call that the Law of Moses. It's also known as the Pentateuch. It means the 5 scrolls. Or the Hebrew word Torah, it means teaching. Okay? And so typically in the New Testament, the Greek word that translates the word Torah is law. And so when Paul talks about law, he's talking about those 5 books of Moses, which have 613 commandments that the Jewish people are expected to live under. And so he's talking actually about Jesus coming to redeem, first of all, the Jewish people, those who are under the law, so that they might receive adoption as sons, or sons and daughters. One thing about the Bible, it's was written in a patriarchal age. When you hear sons, it's always kind of more gender neutral. Okay, so, and so because you are sons, God has sent the Spirit of His Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. Abba is the Hebrew word for, it's really more like dad than father. It's very intimate. And so we have the Holy Spirit residing in our hearts now, who is crying out to God the Father, Abba, Abba, you are our daddy. Beautiful verse. What I want to focus on is that phrase at the beginning, when the time had fully come. I know this from the King James Version. In the fullness of time, God sent his Son. And there's a lot going on in that phrase. I could spend a whole course talking just about what is the fullness of time. But what I want to focus on now, in this module, is how God sets everything up for Jesus. Okay? In the textbook that we're using by C. Kavin Rowe, the Christianity Surprise, I hope you're reading that and enjoying that. He talks about the story of everything. Maybe you've gotten to that part. He talks about how one of the things that Christianity brings to the ancient world, one of the surprises of Christianity, is this story of everything that sort of explains what everything, where everything belongs, why it's here, its purpose, and points everyone to the Creator who made everything. This story of everything encompasses everything for Rowe. He's not talking just about the Bible. He's talking about everything you encounter is included in this story of everything. All the history of all of the peoples of the earth that is not in the Old Testament. So Herodotus, everything you read in ancient history of Herodotus, everything you read about the Greek philosophers, all of that is a part of the story of everything. And the gospel, Rowe is saying, is sort of the decoder ring to explain what everything means. It puts everything into a narrative instead of just a bunch of random information. Okay? Well, at the heart of this story of everything, for Christians, and I would say also for the Jews, is the story of God's salvation, his salvific works for the people of Israel. So the story of Israel is at the heart of the story of everything. And that's why the Old Testament is all about Israel. And that's why Israel should still be important for Christians today. I'm not talking about the nation state of Israel today. I'm talking about the Jewish people and the people actually before the Jewish people, the 12 tribes descended from Abraham. And God's story with Israel, how he brings them one act of salvation after another, is really setting everything up for him to send his Messiah, Jesus. There are three major movements to this story of everything, okay? And they are these. I mean, I could split this up all different sorts of different ways. We don't have time to read through the entire Old Testament. Gosh, I wish we did. But if I were just going to pick out three of the most important things about the Old Testament for you to know, like the main overarching plot of the Old Testament, they are these, okay? So the first major plot point is that Israel was enslaved by the Egyptians for 400 years, and God sends Moses to rescue Israel from the hands of Pharaoh through these mighty plagues where he punishes Egypt for what they're doing. Egypt actually expels Israel from their midst because they realize they're being punished. They kind of regard Israel almost as a curse living among them. And then God brings them to Mount Sinai and gives them the law, which makes them free. So that's the first major plot point, the Exodus from Israel. Okay? Exodus from Egypt, excuse me. And the bringing to Israel, the Holy Land. The second major plot point would be the installation of David as a king and the promise that all of David's descendants, that there will always be a king sitting on the throne of Israel who will reign in David's stead after he is gone. That he will always have a grandson, a great-grandson, a great-great-grandson on down the line until the end. There will always be a son of David sitting on the throne of Israel. Okay, that's the second major plot point. And then the last one is this exile and restoration. So sadly, Israel did not live according to the law God gave them on Mount Sinai. Israel rebelled against God, they went into idolatry, and so they were punished by being sent into exile. First of all, the northern part of the Hebrews was sent into Assyria, and they completely disappeared. That's the 10 lost tribes, we call those. And then the Jewish people in the south, they were sent to Babylon in 586 BC. Babylon destroys the temple, and they take the leaders, at least, of the Jewish people into exile in Babylon. But there's a promise God makes to them when that happens through his prophet Jeremiah, and he says that in 70 years he will restore them to their homeland. And that's the other part of this third plot line, that God exiles Israel from their homeland, but then he restores them to their homeland. Okay? All of this, those three plot points, the Exodus, the Davidic dynasty, and the exile and restoration, those three plot points set everything up for Jesus, for Christians. For Christians, the fullness of time is Jesus coming at the end of this story. It's all a setup for that.